Hi, I'm Michelle Klein, member of the GSB Alumni Association Board, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this production.
Cambiar vidas,
Change lives.
change organizations,
Change
दुनिया में
organizations.
बदलाव.
Change the world.
Well, thank you for the awesome introduction. I appreciate that. I was super nervous, and then you all started filing in, and I was like, these are all my great friends that I've made over the last 2 years, and so I'm just so honored to be here, and I am so grateful that you are entrusting me with this last lecture. It's something that I take. It's just an incredible honor. It means the world to me. So thank you for that. I want to say congratulations to all of you, not just on the last couple of years, but really on your whole lives. The 25 years or 30 years leading up to getting to Stanford, and everything you put into it, the incredible intensity, work, the sacrifices you made, the decisions you made, and the grit that you showed to get here. I hope you feel like you earned the seat that you're sitting in and you belong here. And I just hope you'll, over the next couple of days, appreciate really what you've done, because it's really impressive. Give yourselves a big hand. The last lecture I took very seriously. I said, this is my last lecture I'm ever going to give. What am I going to say? I'm going to try to tie in things we talked about in class, things I talked about in wellness, and I'm going to talk about even stuff we did during lunches and stuff like that. I'm going to do all that in 25 minutes. Let's see how it goes. So I turned 50 this year, and as many of you who know have had me in class, I'm a pretty reflective person, and I've thought about what have I learned over that time? As Drake said, I've been on many journeys, had lots of failures, and some stuff go well. And what I realized at the end of all that is that life is really the most challenging journey of all that we're all going to have, and that all of you will have. And then what I realized over 50 years is it's really an internal journey. It's one that you're going to really be wrestling with yourself over that time. And there's a quote that I love that summarizes this journey better than anything I could come up with, from Michelangelo. And Michelangelo sculpted the David, and he painted the Sistine Chapel. And one of his early works was this angel. People had never seen this intricacy and detail in this angel before. And they asked him, how did you sculpt this angel out of this block of stone? And Michelangelo said famously, I saw the angel in the marble, and I carved until I set it free. The reason that quote is so important, and that it's my favorite quote, is that we, all of us, we're the angel in the marble. And that we, at our core, are these beautiful, infinite, incredible beings. We have power beyond our wildest imagination. And we're perfect just as we are. And that the real journey is to sculpt away the stone that we're encased in. And most of the most constraining stone that we have, it's self-erected. It's the constraints we put on ourselves. And it's things like, here's what my parents think I should do, here's what my roommate's doing. I compare myself to this person, and I compare myself unfavorably. I can't do this, I don't know how to do this. I'm not sure I'm going to make it. It might not work out, I might fail. And I'm not ready, I'm not enough. And really, that's what's underneath a lot of that is, I'm not enough. So that's the stone that we kind of place on ourselves. There's a subtle part of this quote that I want to make sure that I make like not subtle, which is that Michelangelo didn't sculpt the angel or the David by going out and finding a head and gluing it on, and then finding wings and then welding those on. The angel was already perfect. And that really, if I had a gift I could give to you, it would be for you to just give yourself permission to be your true selves over the course of your lives. That would be the gift I would give you. That's what I've learned over my 50 years, is that when you give yourself that gift, you tap into this energy source and this joy and happiness and really power that you can't access any other way. You can't access it by trying to be someone else. So what I'm going to do today is take you on a little bit of a journey to hopefully help you unlock your potential, kind of carve away that marble over the next 25 minutes or so. And I'm going to use my own story to tell you a little bit about this. So I grew up in a small town in Ohio, and actually my parents and my wife are here, who are from that same town. And I talk about my wife all the time in class, and she's actually not snuffleupagus, she's real, and she's here. Anyway, so I grew up in this small town, and I had a lot of marble around me. I would have described myself as having pretty average abilities, athletic abilities, average intellect, really. And I would say the town I was in was average, and that was my identity. And so I had these pretty firm stone walls. And then when I was about 13, like a lot of us, like I wanted to feel like it mattered. I wanted to feel significant. And so in Ohio, one way to do that was through athletics. So I tried out for basketball and I got cut, and I tried out for football and I was too small. So we had wrestling in Ohio. That was one of the sports we had. And wrestling, you could be any weight class, and they didn't have cuts. So I was like, all right, great. My first 3 years, 7th and 8th and 9th grade, really the only way to describe my career would have been forgettable. It was just, and that, by the way, is a very optimistic description of those 3 years. So I got to 9th grade that summer, and I said 2 words that I'd been saying my whole life to that point. I said, not me, not now. You know, I'm not the right person, now's not the right time. I go on walks with some of you, and you'll tell me about something you're excited about, and I'll hear you say those words. Not me, not now. You know, I'm not ready. That summer, though, 2 things happened for me. One was I bought a Sony Walkman, and this was the 1980s version of your iPhone, and this was magical, just as magical as the iPhone was. And I was at the library one time checking out some music, and there was this program, and it said, Think and Grow Rich. I was like, awesome. Who doesn't want to think and grow rich? Turns out that book wasn't at all about thinking and growing rich. It was about conquering your inner self. That's what it's actually about. It's a great book, Napoleon Hill. But I became addicted to these self-help, for lack of a better word, audio tapes. I listened to Zig Ziglar, Tony Robbins, Dale Carnegie, Stephen Covey. So I had a job over the summer, every summer in Ohio, which was mowing lawns. I attached this Walkman and I'd plow it, put in Tony Robbins. And then, mowing lawns is pretty straightforward. You walk in a line in the sun, and then when you're done, you get to the end of the row, you turn around and you walk back. That's how, pretty much, I just taught you how to mow lawn. And I did this for 6 hours a weekend for my entire high school. And I brainwashed myself with these tapes, basically. And I was, my parents had just gone through a divorce, and I wasn't really part of a friend group, and athletics wasn't really working out for me. So this became something for me to grab onto. I was really impressionable, and I grabbed onto these with everything I had. So I'll summarize. Literally, I added up the hours one time, and it's thousands of hours I listened to. I'm going to summarize it for you in about 2 minutes. You're welcome. And the basic summary is that about 99% of people never actually figure out what they want. There's a lot of activity. They spend all this time. They're running around. They're busy. They're going all these directions. But they actually never take the time to figure out what is it that they want. And they said, you will be the top 1% if you could just figure out what you want. Take that time. We're going to talk about that today. The best exercise that I know to figure out what you want, I've done with many of you in class, but I'm sorry I'm going to do it again because this is my last lecture, is imagine the following. Imagine you rub a magic lamp and a genie comes out. And the genie says to you, I can't give you any wish, but what I can give you is that whatever you throw yourself into with your life, whatever you really commit yourself to, that is going to work out amazingly well. It's going to be way harder than you think. It's going to take longer than you think. You're going to have some face plants. It's going to be tough. And when you fail, you're going to think that I've abandoned you, but I haven't. But it's going to be the journey of a lifetime. What would you wish for from that genie if you really had that power, if you really had that blessing? That's my favorite prompt that I've come up with, and I've shared that, obviously, with many of you. The second thing that happened that summer was there was this movie called Vision Quest. How many of you seen Vision Quest? Like 2 of you, awesome. Actually, and my wife too. I made her see it many times. She raised her hand. Vision Quest is, so for those of you who don't know, can't believe you haven't seen it. Vision Quest is a 1980s movie. It's kind of like Rocky for wrestling. That's the best way to describe it. There's this wrestler named Loudon Swain, and he decides he's gonna cut down 2 weight classes, and he's gonna wrestle this defending state champion, Brian Shute. And his buddy, who's on kind of his friend that goes on this journey with him, says, Loudon, you're on a vision quest. This is a vision quest. Well, this is a B movie probably by any standard, except if you were a 15-year-old wannabe wrestler from Perrysburg, Ohio, in which case it was my anthem. And I still, to this day, have seen that movie more than any other movie I've ever seen. I can say pretty much every line in the movie. So anyway, those 2 things conspired, and I go back to wrestling my 10th grade year, and I'm standing in the wrestling room, and I'm looking up at the wall. We're having a pizza party in the fall, and I'm looking up at the wall, and there's a list of all the starting wrestlers, and I am not one of them. And my buddy comes up and he puts his arm around me and he says, Weaver, only place you can make that weight, make the starting lineup is at 125 pounds. And he punches me in the gut, like literally and figuratively punches me in the gut. So to give you an idea, so I look at this, and I decide that I have a decision to make, and I'm eating this pizza, and I throw the pizza in this trash, and I had this ceremonious moment where I said, all right, I'm gonna go on my own vision quest, and I'm gonna drop to 125 pounds, make the starting lineup. Now this story does not end the way that Vision Quest does. I do make the weight, by the way, just give you a sense of 125 pounds. I was at the same height as I am now. I weigh 185 right now. So when I decided to cut the weight, I was 150, and then I cut another 25 pounds from that. So it was, to this day, one of the hardest things I've ever done. But that moment when I threw the pizza in the trash would turn out to be the turning point in my life. And the reason is that I basically drew a line. I didn't do this figuratively, but I did this kind of in my head. I drew this line here. And this line, on this side of the line is where I was, and on the other side of the line are the things that I really wanted, the thing I wanted to be, the goals that I had. And up till that point in my life, I'd always been tip-a-toeing and putting my toe over on the other side of the line. But I really never believed it. I never committed. I never stepped fully on the other side. And that was the first time in my life where I knew when I threw that piece of pizza away that this wasn't going to be something I was going to do for a week. It wasn't something I was going to do for a month. This is something that I was committed, and I was going all in, and I did. And my mom can attest to that. So there are 2 things. My story today is I'm going to share 5 things with you, 5 ways that you can free yourself from the marble. And I uncovered 2 of them that I'll kind of highlight for you in that story. The first one is that these walls that we have around us, and we view them as stone, and they're the most dangerous when we don't even realize that we have them. And those are the stories we tell ourselves, the assumptions we make, the things that we say we can and can't do. The most constraining walls that you will have are the ones that you have made in your mind for yourself. Those are the ones that will cause you the most, problems. And those walls are not actually made of stone, but if you push them, they're malleable. And one way to push them hard is to commit, to step over and not look back. And then those walls will start to give, and they'll start to yield, and you can push, and they'll move. And so when I pushed on this wall, first, I had a wall that was my athletic ability. I have a wall of intelligence, my wall of who I fit in, my friends, all that. But I started pushing on this athletic wall, and it moved, and it gave. And eventually, I cleared it out altogether. And as Drake said, I became captain of a national championship rowing team, having never rowed before. And I realized there was no wall there at all. It was just walls I was erecting. And the same was true with my view of my identity for intelligence and many other things, is that they weren't walls at all. So my first takeaway is almost any wall that you can imagine will yield to you with time. It will yield to you when you're committed. It will yield to you at your best. There's almost no wall that won't yield. The second takeaway I have has to do with your identity. We all act consistent with our identity. So we're gonna behave today based on how we perceive ourselves. What is our identity? Where's your identity come from? Well, your identity comes from your subconscious mind. And your subconscious, 95% of all the things you think are in your subconscious mind. And so your subconscious is really powerful. Another thing I learned from these tapes. 95% is your subconscious mind. And you've heard the expression, we only use a fraction of our minds. How many of you have heard that expression, right? We only use a little bit of it. So I would say it differently. I would say only a small fraction of our mind is working for us. And the other 95%, it's all over the place. And often, more often than not, it's working against us. So our identity comes from when our subconscious is picking up cues all the time. It says like, you're not that good at this, you're not that good at that, you're not comparing well to this person, man, I failed at this, oh, I'm not as good as this, I'm not, and that's our identity's coming. So really our identity's coming from our past. Well, what happened is I started developing these genie goals and having something I actually wanted. And one of the things these tapes would say is, visualize it, write it down, talk about it all the time. And in a very short period of time, my identity started becoming my destination. It'll happen like that. So if you want to free yourself from the marble, consider having your identity be where you want to go, not where you've been. It'll completely change the way you look at the world. I want to go back to the movie Vision Quest for a second. So Vision Quest is follows the arc of a very common architecture of stories. Joseph Campbell identified this arc, and he called it the hero's journey. So the hero's journey goes something like this. It says, once upon a time, there was a hero, and that hero felt something inside of them. They felt something, that they had this power that they were ready to give to the world. And yet, this hero lived in this ordinary world, and they'd experienced the power at times, but not fully. They weren't really 100% able to express this. And then the story goes on and says, and then one day, until one day, something changed for that hero. They heard some call to adventure, some call to action. And the hero's reluctant at first. They're not sure if they should answer this call. And I want to argue, this is where many of you are right now. You are, make no mistake, you are the hero. You have this power inside of you that you've felt, that you know is there. You've had this power that you've expressed at times in your life that is incredible, and you've felt it. And I know from teaching you, having lunches, coffees, dinners, drinks, I know that each of you also is hearing a call. The call could be that there's a problem that breaks your heart, that you want to be a part of the solution. The call could be that there's something you want to introduce to the world, a product, a technology, something like that. The call it could be something more subtle. It could be the call is your call. It's not what I think. It's not what your neighbor thinks. It's not what your roommate thinks. It's what you think. Your call could be that you want to be a teacher. The call could be you want to be an actor or a writer or whatever it is. Sometimes for some of you it's really loud, that call. You know exactly what it is. And for some of you it's a whisper. But you got to listen to that call. You got to hear that. And many of you are reluctant right now. You're in the reluctant hero part of the story. At least from spending time with you. I was the reluctant hero too when I graduated. If you would have asked me any time in the 2 years I was at Stanford, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to go build a firm that's going to unleash people and it's going to be built around talent. That's what I said I was going to do. And then when it came time to graduate, I listened to all my fears and my doubts and my limiting beliefs, and I kind of took this, and I had this decision to make between these two jobs or doing what I really wanted to do. I made a decision the way a lot of you make a decision, which is like this. I made it in my head, and I said, well, here's a list of the pros, and here's a list of the cons, and here's the good things, and here's the bad things. I even had a spreadsheet of expected value, and this is the way I know you make decisions because I talk to you about it, and you all kind of go like this, and then I asked 37 different people for advice, thinking the 37th was going to have my answer for me. I'm usually the 37th on your list too, by the way. So I made this decision, and then, of course, with all this stuff, I went to the well-lit, well-worn path because that seemed more logical and more straightforward, and that's where all that analysis led me. I went to a firm, and when I showed up, honestly, a little bit of me died. And a little bit of me died that, each day I was there until, and I kind of was like that hero looking out the window, and I'm kind of like waiting for someone to come rescue me and take me on this journey. But after a while, I stopped looking out the window, and I just became my environment. Their values became my values. Their goals became my goals. Once again in my life, I had said, not me, not now. Not me, not now. I had another catalyst come in the form of sort of a very tragic event, which is a close friend of mine. He woke up like all of us did today, thinking he had his whole life in front of him. And that was his last day. And I realized that I don't know what I was putting off. I don't know when the time was. If it's not now, then when's it going to be? And I told myself at that time I was never going to say the words not me, not now again. And I don't know that I have said it since then. The third thing to think about in unleashing yourself from the marble is there's another way to make a decision, which is not in your head, but it's in your heart. And there's a quote which is, you can't solve the problems of the mind with the mind. You can't solve you can't solve your mind with your mind, but you can. Your answer is most likely in your heart. So the way to make that decision is to really silence your mind and just think what's true for you, what's real. Give yourself a space, time. What's meaningful for you? What's the impact you want to have? What would you do if you knew you weren't going to fail? And give yourself the space to think about that. And my guess is you already know your answer. You're just not giving yourself permission. So the third thing is make your decisions with your heart and not your head, and give yourself permission. Nobody's coming to your rescue. I thought I'd talk quickly about the journey itself. Some of you have started your journey. Some of you are going to start later. Some of your journeys are completely different than my journey, but I'll tell you a little bit about my journey because it's going to have some things in common with yours. I started my firm, and it took me a year to raise a fund. We raised way less than I thought. It took way longer than I thought, but we got going, so we're in business. This was the first time I was going to buy companies not using credit card debt, but I actually had some real money and investors. I was excited, and then promptly lost money on five of my first 8 deals, and lost money on my first fund. I had probably 10 classmates invested in my fund. I lost them money. I was embarrassed. At my 5th reunion, I had a friend put his arm around me and say, Graham, during the greatest wealth creation of all time, this was the dot-com era, you're buying stupid label printing companies. And I remember thinking, yeah, that's pretty much accurate. Not only am I buying stupid label printing companies, it's not really going that well. So it wasn't good. But we started clawing our way back, and then we got a little bit better, and then bam, we got flattened by the recession. Didn't raise a fund for 3 years, and for the second time, I drained my savings, keeping payroll going. So this is my inspiring entrepreneurship story, but the point of the story is that every journey, like using the hero journey analogy, think of like Yoda in Star Wars or Princess Bride. The journey ends up in the swamp. You will end up in this swamp at some point, and the swamp is where you're mucking around in the mud, and you're not sure how to get out of the swamp. You don't know if you're going to get out of the swamp or when, and you feel like you have failed. This swamp feels like failure is what it feels like. But I want to just talk about failure for 1 second. I'm going to tell you that none of you fear failure. And you're going to be like, no, Graham, I pretty much fear failure. But you don't. What you fear is underneath failure, which is you fear what happens next. You fear that you can't handle failure, that whatever comes after that, you're not going to be able to handle it. But then if you think back to your lives, how many of you have had something go really wrong that you would have categorized as a failure? Every single one of you. And you know what happened? You got up, you kept going, you're here, and you're about to graduate from Stanford Business School, no less. So you can handle failure. Every single person can handle failure, and that's really what you fear. So in this swamp, this one quote is the thing that kind of helped me a lot, is this quote by Vince Lombardi, who said, he was a coach of the Green Bay Packers, and he said, the Green Bay Packers never lost a football game, but there were a couple occasions where we ran out of time. I love that quote. But the best thing about the swamp is you're in control of the most powerful part, the most powerful tool that you need, which is you have the clock. You know, you're the one who gets to call the game, and you don't have to call it until you're winning. So my fourth takeaway is the journey you'll be on will go through the swamp, and just recognize that. That's normal. When you're in the swamp, realize everyone else has been in the swamp too. Realize failure is not fatal. Failure is not final. You can handle failure, and ultimately you control the clock. As Winston Churchill says, if you're going through hell, keep going. So that's my fourth takeaway. So I'll summarize my takeaways, and then I'll leave you with one final thought. First one is the walls that are erected around you, the most constraining ones, are the ones you put on yourself, and that those walls will move. Those walls are not of stone at all. They're very, very malleable, but they'll move if you throw yourself in with commitment, and almost any wall will yield to you at your best. Second is consider your identity. You'll behave consistent with your identity, so start to think about your identity as your destination, not your past. Third, make your decisions from your heart. In 50 years, I've never made a bad decision from my heart. Make your decisions from your heart and not your head. Nobody's coming to your rescue. No one's going to make that decision for you. No one's going to tell you it's time. No one's going to tell you you're ready. You're the only one who can give yourself permission, just you. But guess what? You're the only one who needs to give you permission too. And remember, the journey will go through the swamp. When you're in the swamp, give me a call. I'll help you out of the swamp. But it's going to be normal, and failure is not fatal. Failure is not final. You control the clock. So I'll just end with a story. My story is about my executive coach named Tom. So I'm in the middle of the swamp, waist deep. This is right after right in the time of the recession, and I hire this coach named Tom. So here's my introduction to Tom. I'm going to reenact it here. I'm like, hey, Tom, I'm Graham. Nice to meet you. Tom gives me this blank look. I'm like, Graham, I always say this because Graham's kind of weird now. I say, Graham, like graham cracker. So maybe it's a nervous thing. This is Tom. Tom says, Graham, what if you suddenly realized you were put on this earth to do something special? So Tom, right? So good to meet you, Tom. That was literally our introduction. And then we talked for 2 years, and every single meeting we had, at some point, sometimes multiple points, Graham, what if you suddenly realized you were put on this earth to do something special? And this one time we were in San Francisco, we're at the deli, and I'm like, there's like 3 people in front of us, and I'm like on my phone. Tom's like, Graham, what if you suddenly realized you were put on this earth to do something special? So I'll ask all of you, what if you suddenly realized you were put on this earth to do something really special? Think about that. And I want to draw a line for you. And you can do this tonight at home, or you can when you have some time, but there's a line here. And you're on this side of the line. On this side of the line, it's really familiar. You've been here before. You have these thoughts from the past. You have an identity. You're very comfortable in this area right here. On this side of the line, you probably have some walls. You're in your head. You're making analytical decisions. But there's a line. And over here is really what you want on the other side. It's what you really want. You know that, and only you would know that, and your heart knows that. And over here is you realizing that the hero's journey isn't just the best architecture of a story, but it's the architecture of your life. It's the best story you could write with this one life we got. And you're the hero of that journey. You get to be the hero of your story. And over here, on this other side of this line, is this call to adventure, and you've been called to. If you really listen and you really pay attention, there's a call over here. And finally, on this side of the line, is going back to what Michelangelo said, that as you realizing that you already have everything that you need, and that you already are everything that you need, and that you're enough. That you're enough. Well, I finally realized with Tom, I would go back and forth thinking, is he a little crazy or is he the Messiah? Sometimes in the same conversation. And I finally realized what he was saying. He wasn't saying, Tom wasn't asking me if I was put on this earth to do something special. He was asking me, what would happen if I realized that? So class of 2022, what would happen if you realized that and stepped over this line? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Graham. Thank you so much, Graham, for that wonderful last lecture. We're going to move to Q&A, so please raise your hands if you have a question you would like to ask. Chris.
I'm a mic runner, but I'll go first. Is this on? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Graham, thanks so much for that. I'm always struck in this conversation and hearing about what you talk about in class, and you talk about these limiting beliefs, which you talked about here too. Do you ever feel the tension between convincing yourself that you are enough, but also keeping that drive to do something special? And how do you navigate that tension?
No, I have it all the time. I mean, it seeps in if you, it's not like it just goes away. You have the doubts and fears and limiting beliefs all the time. And it's kind of what I said, which is I try to think about what is it that I want? You know, what's the bigger why? And, you know, what if I just lean into that? And yeah, definitely sometimes I have to remind myself that I'm enough. It doesn't go away, those voices. There's a concept that, you know, people have used calling our voices inside our gremlin or saboteurs. And I remember thinking I was the only person who had this voice that was like pounding me with all this negative stuff. And then I realized, oh my gosh, we all have that. So I think it doesn't go away, but I think the awareness that it's there is really the best thing you can do to fight it.
Caroline has the next question.
Kevin.
I also go by Caroline. Graham, thanks. Appreciate the insights. You know, on one hand, you talk about this sense of urgency and actively chasing what it is you think you're called to do. On this other hand, there's this notion of delayed gratification and spending time either getting the credentials or, you know, garnering the experiences before you chase that thing. Do you ever feel tension between those two things? And if so, how do you reconcile it?
Yeah, I don't know that there's a conflict. You know, I think that there's a false dichotomy in that, Kevin. What I mean is, when you're clear on where you want to go, you should 100% accumulate things that are going to take you there. And if that is knowledge, if that's experience, you know, accumulate things that are going to take you where you want to go. That's different than, this is where I want to go, I'm not ready, so instead I'm going to kind of start on this journey over here. And they're very different. So I think what you're describing is, yeah, sure, if you're super clear on your North Star, anything you want to do to move toward that is going to be awesome. But just be intellectually honest if you're really doing that, or if you're just kind of moving tangential to where you want to go.
Another question down here for Orly.
Thanks so much, Graham. It was great to hear from you today, and I've loved being in your class. And I take many of the things you've said to heart, and they've helped me. I'm curious, when you're like genie goal or the thing you're going after, how do you balance that with the people in your family and in your life who are also going after their own things when you have like interdependent relationships?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think just, having a lot of communication about what you're both going after, and then, what you're talking about, though, I think is more of a tactic. Like, I think you and Ben should support each other in trying to achieve what you're both trying to achieve, and encourage each other. And there might be times when you both have to take on roles that you're going to have to share the duties. But I don't think that gets in the way of you both, clearly kind of walking toward what you want to be going after.
I think Amanda had the next question.
Hi, Graham. Let's imagine for a minute that the angel has been revealed. You've self-actualized. It's very nice lighting up here. I want to understand how you maintain humility and approachability when you reach that goal, if it is attainable, and to turn around and be able to bring others up with you.
I think one of the things that I always thought was that, there's a great quote by Marianne Williamson. I'm not going to get it right, but she basically says, you giving yourself permission gives other people permission. You shining bright gives others permission to shine bright. And I think there's so much truth in that. I mean, I think about the people that I admire the most, like, Whitney Wolford came to our class this year, and she's just herself. She just, like, you can just feel her energy and herself, and it doesn't, in my mind, it doesn't have anything to do with humility. It gave me permission to say, wow, this is what someone who's really fired up about what they want to do looks like. In terms of, I think people that you perceive as arrogant are probably actually not doing that. They're probably trying to pretend and be something else. The people that I know that I admire the most, they are, they actually are pretty humble, and they're pretty happy with who they are. They're not trying to be something different. So I think sometimes arrogance is almost the opposite of being your full self.
Joe?
Hey, Graham. You've come such a long way from being that skinny kid, striving to make it on the wrestling team.
Thank you.
And my question is, during
No, you can just keep going. You don't need to ask a question. I mean,
my question is more, when you share that story of friends coming to you, they're kind of all involved in tech. They're going with the bubble.
right,
And you're buying a label printing company.
right.
At that point, how do you have conviction to keep doing what you're doing and not just follow the herd and what everyone else is doing?
Yeah, it's a great question. There is one person in my class who will remain nameless, who follows every herd. It was hedge funds it was .com, then it was hedge funds, and then I think now he's doing like a crypto SPAC or something. I'm actually not sure I'm exaggerating. I think that's actually true. And I think for me at least, I could see some progress. It wasn't all bad. Like, there would be moments where I'd say I could kind of see how this might work out, and I was having some small little wins along the way, which was enough to keep me encouraged. And the other thing is, I got really fortunate that the very first 3 or 4 people we hired at Alpine were just unbelievable partners of mine, and they were in the swamp with me. And there's a good expression, I don't know who said it, which is like, a problem shared is a problem halved. And we were just in it together, and there were days when I would have a down day and I would need to get dragged out, and there were days when they would, and I would need to drag them out. So that was a huge part. So I'd say those 2 things is just having some great people with me, and then just seeing a little bit of progress along the way, and also having the conviction to not have to follow and dive into the herd. I literally didn't understand a lot of it. I won't go off on my crypto tangent, but I didn't understand a lot of that, and so I yeah, I actually wasn't like I'm smarter than everyone. I actually thought maybe I'm not as smart as everyone, but I stuck with what I kind of understood.
Go down here to Mackenzie.
Thanks, Graham. I'm like right front and center. So kind of getting on a little bit the swamp point, I think looking back on your career, it's easier to say, just stick it out, like stay in the swamp, you're struggling, obviously it worked out tremendously. How do you know, and we've heard a lot of stories from people who've come to class of people who have tried one thing, it didn't work out, they left that on the side of the road, they went and did something different, or they pivoted their company to something else. Like, how do you know when the time is right to just say, or what advice do you give to people to say like, hey, like this is not working and it's never going to, and let me find something else?
And that's a great question. There's a huge difference between pivoting and deciding you're done. There's a big difference. I mean, we pivoted the whole time. We're still pivoting. I mean, I think that's really healthy. Like that to say, hey, this is working really great. Let's do more of that. And this isn't working. Let's do less of that. I mean, I think that's just great, leadership. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do. What's different is like, so often what I see is like, imagine you're running a marathon. I see people run 25 miles and they don't know how close they are, and they turn around and run back, which is 25 miles back when they only had to go one more. See the math there you go. They just finished the marathon. But so I think it's not about sticking with something that's not working. I think it's more just having the confidence that you're going to figure out the answer by, with a few pivots. One thing I'll just, as an aside, the one kind of question that we've asked that has made us more successful maybe than any other question is, what's working that we can do more of? Most people focus on what's wrong and what's not going right, but it kind of goes back to that angel in the marble, which is like, there's actually some things that we're really great at that are true to us, that are things that make us special. Let's like go all in on that. So for example, at Alpine, I would say I'm an average investor. I don't really have a ton of energy for deals. Like that's not really what gets me fired up, but I'd say the thing that gets me excited is people and talent, and we build a whole firm around that. We leaned into what we're good at. So I think giving yourself permission to do that.
Kate?
Hi, Graham. Thank you so much for this beautiful lecture. My question is about reconciliation of this call to action and follow your path and your passion and your cause and sacrifice. When sometimes things happen and things change drastically, it's another call to respond to some inner values, to maybe some traumatic experiences in your family or something else. How do you reconcile this maybe time that you take away from your path or energy or anything else on your journey? Yeah.
Well, first off, I'm sorry if that's what you're going through right now. So I'm really sorry to hear that. But what I'd say is what you're describing actually is your call. That's your louder call, and you're actually you're giving that, you're listening to that call, and that's the call that you should be answering right now. My call is I'm not saying to anybody that you should be an entrepreneur, you should be a leader. All I'm saying is you should listen to whatever's true for you, whatever you, in your heart what the right thing is, and it sounds like for you right now that might be your family. So I think that's exactly what you should be doing. And then when it's time, you'll decide if you want to listen to another call at that time. But it sounds like you know the answer right now.
Karen, down here.
Thank you, Graham. You mentioned 99% of the people don't figure out what they really want to do. You and others at this school and in our lives have been supporting us on this journey to figure out what we want to do. Going forward, how can we continue to help others in our life that are maybe not in this room to figure that out?
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing you can do, and this is for all of you or people you want to help, is just make space to ask the questions. Is, you have this, like, all of you, when you get a couple months from now, I know this is scary, you're going to actually be at work, and you might have back-to-back Zoom calls for 10 hours. It's really easy just to get swept up in that, and you need to make space. You need to put 2 hours on the calendar, and maybe you have a coach, or maybe you have a couple friends. You need to ask those questions, and it doesn't always come out of the first session or the second one or the third one. It might take weeks, but you have to make space to listen effectively. And so the thing you could give to your people you're trying to help is space to ask these questions.
I think our next question was back here.
Good afternoon, Graham. Thank you. From someone who never made enough space yet. Very intrigued in your firm and yourself and how you encourage people and you focus on people and help them uncover what they can be. What coaching do you give in terms of balance between pursuing what you can be, identifying, consuming, and committing to what you can be, and the balance of what everything else in life demands, right? Do you see your team members struggling with that balance, and what advice do you give?
Yeah. And just to be clear, it's like the balance of just how much they're throwing themselves into work and that they have other stuff that goes away. The one way to think about this is, and this is a framework, is that the amount of work that you have is infinite, and you could fill your entire life with it, and you're never going to be done. And that's also kind of depressing, but the reason I'm bringing it up is, if you say, I'm going to go to my son's football game when I'm done with my work, or I'm going to make time to exercise as soon as I'm done with work, or I'm going to go to my friend's wedding when I'm done with work, just realize you're never done with work. There's no such thing for someone like you who's driven and wants to go far. And so you have to put those other things in first. You have to say, I'm going to go to the son's game or the wedding or whatever, and then the work's going to have to kind of work around that. Because if you don't put those things in, work will just consume everything. Because you're never done. There's so much that you can do at all times. So for some reason that framework has helped me a lot. Not ever say, not ever feel like, I'm going to at some point be done, because you're not.
Melissa, back here in the center.
Hey, Graham. I'm Melissa. I was lucky to take your managerial skills class way back in the fall last year. And I'd love if you could reshare the top mistakes you saw your classmates make 20 years out, because that was something that really stayed with me.
Top mistakes my classmates made. I think I shared most of them in this talk, which is kind of get swept up, say not. The two biggest, most dangerous words that you or my classmates ever say are not now. If you hear yourself saying those words, just be really, really careful. Be afraid, because not now is really, it's really fear kind of in another word, or in another format, and just it's very dangerous, because as I said earlier, you become your environment, the people you're with their values become yours. And so mistake number one that I saw my classmates make is just putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And the other things would be things I talked about in the talk, which would be, listening to your head, not your heart, and never really deciding what it is you're excited about or what you want. Those would be probably the biggest ones I've seen.
Great. We have time for one or two more questions if there are any. We have Kevin back here.
Hi, Graham. Kevin here. So you are a big fan of self-development. So I wonder what you think about improving on your weakness or development area, and working on your strengths.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of working on your strengths, because that's what's uniquely you. That's the thing. That's where your superpower is where your strength. And what's interesting is I always remember thinking, well, this is my strength. I'm sure it's everyone else's strength, and it's not. The thing that you love Naval Ravikant always says, what's the thing that for you is play, that for everyone else feels like work? That's a good indication of where you should be spending your energy, because you'll always be better at that than anyone else, because you'll just do it for fun. For me, that's teaching. I mean, my wife can tell you that. I'm walking around in my house, working on lectures and giving this talk that I just gave to my pillows in the living room, and because that's play for me. That's fun, and so I think leaning into your things that really give you energy is your superpower. There will be weaknesses that could completely take you out of the game. Usually that has to do with self-awareness and how you're showing up and some kind of hard edges you have. That's usually the weakness that takes people out of the game. It's not usually intellect or horsepower. It's ability to get along with people, really. And so that's one that you probably need to work on that enough that you're not going to like shoot yourself in the foot, playing to your strengths. And that's the one that trips probably the most people up that I've seen.
We'll do our last question back here.
Hi, Graham. I was incredibly grateful to be one of your TAs earlier this year, and I saw firsthand your commitment to DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and all of the things that you do to bring other voices into the room or other opinions into the room for people that don't look like you, sound like you, or have the same experience as you. And I'm thinking more about Karen's question of like, how can we support other people and whatnot who are not necessarily involved in the same circles as us? And I was just wondering, could you say a word about what you do to learn or continue to hear from people who don't look like you, sound like you, and then what we could do to incorporate that into how we are showing up to boardrooms, meeting rooms, pitches, whatever it might be. So it's really a question about learning from diverse voices.
That's an awesome question. By the way, thanks for the kind words, Connor. I mean, I'll tell you just an example that we've learned over the years, and I'll use it as an example of companies. Rather than talk in generalities, I'll use like a real example. So when we go into a business, we last year we invested in, we bought 127 businesses last year, and when we go in, most often we are actually putting in a new leadership team, because that's what the business needs, and we're very upfront about that. The first move we make is to actually enroll everyone in the company in where we're going. And we have this expression that the answer is always in the room. We don't have the answer. There's no top down. It is like literally enrolling everybody in this conversation. And I remember when I took over a business when I was around 2010, and I became CEO. And I did this. I went on a listening tour, and I sat there with a yellow pad and a pen, and I went and met with all the kind of most of the leaders in the company, and a lot of the people that were on the ground as well. And I sat down, and the most common thing that they ever said was, no one's ever asked me my opinion before. and the ideas were there. Like, I didn't have to be brilliant. I just had to like give those voices oxygen. And not only did I get a better answer from that, but everybody felt like they contributed and that they were enrolled in the solution because they had been asked and they'd been invited to that conversation. So you really just have to listen, and you don't have to be brilliant. The people that you're going to lead, the people that you're going to be involved with, they will have the answer, and you just have to kind of make sure you're giving their voices some oxygen.